Welcome to the Weekly Times of Industry show, and today I have a great show for you today. I have Bob Moriarty of 321 Gold and 321 Energy, and Bob came online with these two websites, 321gold.com and 321energy.com, almost 16 years ago, and they cover oil, natural gas, coal, solar, wind, nuclear energy. And those sites feature both articles, editorials, pricings, update. But what I really love about Bob and speaking to him prior to the interview is I learned he was a Marine F-4B pilot. He flew over 832 missions in Vietnam, holds 14 international aviation records. He even told me that he did 400 to 500 property tours to mining sites. And of course, a year ago, he wrote the great book, Nobody Knows Anything. Bob, how are you today?
I'm doing very good.
Good. I'm glad to have you on the show. First of all, because for a year now, you've been living in France, and it's very important for our listeners to understand right now what's going on in Europe and how the situation in the Middle East and North Africa has reshaped how Europe looks like. So can you elaborate what's going on a demographic point of view in Europe, and what do you think the implications of this could be for that continent?
Well, I've actually been living in England and Switzerland and France. We're staying in France right now. But I do a lot of traveling, both in the mining business and personally. The demographics are very important for your listeners to understand. France, England, Italy, Spain, their birth rate is not high enough to sustain the current population. Now, when they bring immigrants in and when they bring refugees in, the birth rate is far higher than it is for the local population. And that creates problems of its own. Now, I'm not anti-immigrant, and I'm certainly not anti-refugee. However, you can look at the riots in Paris. Paris is the most beautiful city in the world, and there are areas in Paris that even the police can't go to. England voted for Brexit by and large because they wanted the ability to control immigration and control refugees. The refugee issue is a giant problem. There's 65 million refugees, and we need to stop creating so many refugees. That's the first part of the solution. But it's like poverty in Haiti. There is no solution. I mean, what exactly do you do? It's something that's really out of control, and I don't think anybody has a good handle on it. But for Europe to keep its character, it can't be overrun with refugees from Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan and Libya without creating an enormous problem. Now, the EU is functionally, financially, it's a financial disaster, and that's why they had the elections that went the way they did in Italy, and we've got elections coming up in France soon, and that's about Brexit. The EU has failed, the euro has failed, and there's going to be a catastrophic failure at some point in time. But when you introduce the refugee issue, you throw a whole new wrench into the game. When we were in Switzerland, the Swiss were absolutely terrified. They knew that it would change Switzerland if they had an unlimited number of refugees coming in. So it's a real problem.
Bob, I want to understand the global implications of this refugee camp, say 20 years into the future. Are we looking at an Islamic State inside of Europe? How can you handle, like you said, the Western world doesn't breed as fast as some of the Muslim world, partly because it's their religion is more pro breeding, and partly because of the socioeconomic differences. With two parents working, it's most families right now have 2 to 3 babies at most, and we know that the demographics in Europe are very aging. The Islamic world is very young, considerably younger than Europeans. This is creating a whole new breed of people inside of Europe. What do you see going forward? How can this play out?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think there's any good way it could play out. The United States started getting involved in a serious war after 2001, and I, for one, think they're utter disasters. I think they're a mistake. I said so at the time. They're illegal wars. Saddam Hussein was not the enemy of the United States. Going after the Taliban was absurd because Taliban were willing to turn Osama bin Laden off. But the CIA has been engaging in a series of wars going back to the 1950s, and these were wars that were not voted for. They were wars that were not debated, and the ramifications of the war are very dangerous. For example, the United States sponsored a coup d'etat in Iran in 1953, and every single Iranian is aware of it. But you could ask 100 Americans. Americans are totally oblivious to it. Iran's not the enemy of the United States. Iran would be a good partner if we'd stop being so belligerent. I'm anti-war, and I've written a book on war. I call it The Art of Peace, because I've seen war firsthand. Nobody wins any war. You just have one side that loses a lot more than the other. We need to get the refugee issue sorted out, because absolutely, if you create refugees, there are going to be terrorists in there.
Sure, and your note about war is definitely understood. There are no winners. There are only losers and far more losers. I want to ask you about your time in Vietnam, because that time there that you spent there proved to you that there could be a very different type of 1970s after what you saw in the 1960s in Vietnam. Can you explain how that played into your decision to buy gold for the first time, and how do you view your physical gold position?
Okay, here's what happened. I went into the Marine Corps a week after I turned 18. I had very high scores in boot camp. My DIs put me in for flight training. This was just after the Gulf of Tonkin incident. I got accepted into flight training, my commission as a second lieutenant when I was 19, and I was the youngest fighter pilot in the world when I was 20. Now, at that time, and bear in mind, we're talking about the mid-60s, we believed what the government told us. We read newspapers and we listened to the radio, and the media literally controlled how we thought. So when Vietnam started getting hot and heavy, I got orders over there, and I got sent to Vietnam when I was 22. Now, I had an unusual career because I actually flew about 6 or 7 different airplanes while I was in Vietnam. I flew the F-4 when I first got over there, and then they wanted to put me in a ground fact job, and I wasn't interested in doing that, so I got transferred into bird dogs. And after I flew over 800 missions, I said, I've got enough combat. I don't need to prove anything to anybody. So I transferred into a transport outfit, and I flew VIPs around for 6 months. I was there for almost 2 years. Now, when you look around and you see the amount of money that we're spending, you realize, hey, wait a minute, we're not paying for this war. Now, exactly the same thing is true today. In Iraq and Afghanistan, there isn't a single tax that Americans pay that is because of the war. Now, that's scary. We've got a war that we're paying for by borrowing money from China, and that's a really bad idea. So by 1969, when I had been in Vietnam for almost 18 months, I looked around and said it would be a good idea to own some gold. I was flying to Thailand 2 or 3 times a week. Gold was $35 an ounce. So I started buying gold. I'm not talking about a lot of gold. I'm talking about half an ounce or an ounce per month. I continued to buy gold and silver from 1969 up until 1980. And I was a big proponent of people owning some physical metal as an insurance policy. Well, prior to 1980, starting in about 1974, I ferried small planes all over the world. And we used to talk to the other pilots, and I'd say, go up someday. And there was one particular pilot who made fun of me. And then in January of 1980, he came up to me and said, I just made the best deal I've ever made in my life. I bought 2 kilobars of silver at $50 an ounce. And I said, well, you've just done 3 things. One is you picked top in silver. 2, you're never going to get your silver in the first place. And 3, if you're willing to send somebody $3,200 on the basic phone call, let me go in the other room and call you, because you can send me $3,200 anytime you want to. I'll promise you anything. He did pick the top. He didn't get his silver because silver wasn't sold in kilobars in the United States. It sold 10 ounces, 1 ounce, 50 ounces, 100 ounces, but not kilobars. When I wrote the book, I was trying to teach people the lessons that I've learned over 50 years in investing. I'm a contrarian, and there's a time to own gold and silver and a time to sell gold and silver. And the biggest mistake that most investors make is they don't take a profit when they can. Now, silver got its low as $4 an ounce in December of 2001, and I wrote about it, and I said, bottom. And it got as high as almost $50 an ounce in April of 2011. And I wrote about that and said it was about to crash. Investors have to learn. Well, let me backtrack for a minute. There's one reason to buy things, and there's 1,000 reasons to sell. The only reason to buy any stock, or the only reason to buy gold, or the only reason to buy silver is that if you hope you will profit and you're in it to make a profit, you have to sell when you have a profit. The worst case that I've ever seen, I know somebody who invested in Nova Gold when it was 20 cents a share, and he watched it go to $20 a share. It went up 100-fold, and he didn't sell because he thought it was going to go higher. He ended up selling at $56 a share in 2008 when they almost went out of business. Gold stocks, small gold stocks in particular, are lottery tickets, and they've got expiration dates on them, and most of them are going to end up worthless. But like a lottery ticket, you can have a 500 or 1,000% return.
I guess the key to gold stocks that we've found is to stick with people who've done it time and time again and are experts in creating shareholder value. So we follow those people that have proven time and time again that they can do it. And that makes it not a lottery ticket, but you're basically betting on the person and not betting on a piece of a stock. I want to shift gears with you, Bob, and ask you right now: do you own gold?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and for listeners in the U.S. who want to buy gold right now, do you recommend storing the gold in the U.S. or do you recommend that they diversify it around a few locations worldwide? What would be the best way to do it, and why own gold right now? What is the reason to own gold or silver?
That's a really good question. It's about 10 questions in one. Let me try to cover one at a time. I view, and I'm not saying I'm correct, I'm just saying this is how I view it. I view gold and silver in physical form as an insurance policy. There's about $600 trillion in derivatives in the world, and that's on an economy of 70 trillion. You don't need to know anything about derivatives other than they're financial bets. The head of the CFTC in 1998 wanted to regulate derivatives because she thought they were totally out of control when there were 70 trillion. I wrote an article in February of 2002 talking about derivatives, and I thought they were totally out of control at 100. The United States is bankrupt. Most of the countries in the world are bankrupt. The United States has $200 trillion in obligations going forward, and we've got a $16 or $17 trillion a year economy. I get Social Security, but a lot of people who are in their 20s or 30s or 40s are never going to see Social Security because the program is going to die. The United States is in the process of putting exchange controls in if the financial system collapses, and I believe there's a good chance that it will. You could see exchange controls put in all over the world. If you want to own gold and know that you have possession of it, you should diversify. And for American investors, they should have gold. And there's a number of ways that they can do it, and it's perfectly legal to do now. It won't be legal to do forever. And it's an insurance policy, and I think personally that everybody should own some physical gold and silver. I don't make any money out of that. I don't sell either one of them. It's just an opinion, but it's an insurance policy. You wouldn't dream of not having insurance on your home. You wouldn't dream of not having insurance on your car. Why wouldn't you have insurance on your financial situation?
Sure. The way I view it is gold is money, and the rest of the paper is currency. And so it would be foolish to only own currency and not own money as a form of savings. If you're already saving, then why not diversify into a few vehicles of saving? One that is outside the system, one that is not eroded just by printing more of it, and one that is held up throughout history. It would just seem like a good idea. And you know what? I'm very surprised that every person doesn't own like 3 or 4 or 5% of his savings in gold, just as a standard. Lastly, Bob, I want to ask you about the political situation in the U.S. about Donald Trump. He just recently won the election, and he made a lot of promises. The market is betting on those promises coming due. A lot of companies are now feeling much more optimistic about fewer regulations, cutting taxes, infrastructure spending, and to me it all seems very rosy. And it looks to me like now that he needs to make happen what he wanted to make happen, he will start feeling the Washington meals of bureaucracy taking place, and it will take him years and not months to fulfill the vision that he had for the United States. And I think the market will get very disappointed about that. Couple that with raising rates, which should slow down borrowing by these institutions for basically they're borrowing free money and then putting them either in bonds or stocks. That will squeeze the liquidity out of the market and will put prices down a little bit. The American employee right now, it takes them 27 weeks of income to buy the Dow Jones. That's a record high. For comparison, in 1980, it was 2.9 weeks. So we're talking a tenfold increase in the amount of weeks it takes you to participate in the stock market. This is a very big situation in the US, and with it being the largest economy on the planet, what do you think can happen if the markets start realizing that the political machine is not the rosy promises that they thought it was when Trump got elected.
That's absolutely going to happen. Let me backtrack a little bit so everybody has the opportunity to know what I know. There was an excellent book written in the 1980s called The Fourth Turning. And the thesis of the two gentlemen who wrote the book was that there's four different segments that societies go through, and every segment is a generation, or it's about 22 years. And we're in the fourth turning. And the fourth turning is the crisis phase. It's when things get really ugly. You have wars, you have death, you have destruction, you have financial collapses. And in the book, they say there's two different ways you can go in the fourth turning. You can go into total chaos and collapse, or you can have a rebirth of the society. The book that I wrote 15 months ago, The Art of Peace, on the very last page, I predicted the first worldwide revolution in history because of the financial chaos that exists right now. People are not making the money they were making 20 years ago. The rich are getting richer. The poor and the middle class are getting destroyed. All of the benefit of the stock market going up went to the 1%. And the other people who didn't see their standard of living increase at all, they just want the stock market to go up, and they're angry. Brexit was because of anger. Trump was because of anger. The election in Italy was because of anger. The election in France has become of anger. And Trump is facing the revolution that he's already benefited from, and I'm not sure many people realize that we're in a revolution. They will realize it eventually, but he's also facing kickback from the powers that be, who are very much in favor of maintaining the status quo because it's good for them. The real crisis in the United States isn't even financial, which is what I believed a few months ago would be true, and even though I think the stock market's going to crash. But Donald Trump is facing a slow-motion coup d'etat, so things could get really weird in the U.S. very quickly. Now, the world's financial system is very precarious. Any change to it whatsoever could be catastrophic. France or Greece or Italy leaving the EU and breaking up the euro is going to be catastrophic for a lot of people. A stock market crash absolutely could be catastrophic, and a bond market crash even more catastrophic. I hate to sound like a doom and gloomer, but I believe the same way as the fourth turning. We need leadership. We need progressive thinking. We need to stop maintaining the status quo, and we need to replace the shadow government that controls the United States, that keeps getting us involved in wars that we can't win and we can't pay for. We need a tax structure that works, and we need to rebuild the middle class.
Sounds easy.
Strange enough, it's either going to be really easy or really hard, and I can't quite tell you which one's going to happen.
Bob Moriarty, thank you very much. This has been a great interview, and I'm sure people will love it. You've covered so much. Look, you're 70, you've seen it all. You've been here prior to the fiat monetary system starting. You've seen this last 45, 46 years, and I'm sure you're looking in curiosity into the future to see what's going to happen, how this financial system will unfold in the next few years.
Fighter pilot in the world. I was on top of the world, and it looked at people in their 60s and 70s and said, God, I hope I never get to be that old. I'm 70 now, and I look at people your age, and I think, if he knew what my generation has done to his generation, he would be hanging us from the nearest yardarm. You guys are going to have a tough road to hoe, and I hate to say it. My generation has not left a good legacy to young people.
Bob, thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you.
This was an important interview with the legendary Bob Moriarty of 321 Gold, talking to us from his farm at the south of France. Gold is the ultimate form of money and should be a part of your portfolio as a means of savings outside the global banking system. It's the wisest, liberating action step you can take. Wealth Research Group will be releasing an exclusive profile on our top gold company ahead of PDAC on March 5th. PDAC is the world's largest mining convention, and in 2016, it was the beginning of the run-up, and we made great gains in the next 5 months of trading. After 3 of our stock picks made the Canadian Venture Exchange top 10 stock for 2016, we're about to have another record-breaking year in 2017. In March, we're going to focus and feature gold interviews throughout the month with some of the top experts in the industry. Stay tuned, and thanks for listening.